This past Saturday, wrestling fans experienced WrestleDream, AEW's WrestleDream from the Tacoma Dome. A lot of newsworthy items to come out of that pay-per-view, and to help me break it all down, my dear friends, you hear him on the Big Audio Nightmare, the Mid-Atlantic Championship Podcast, the Wrestling News, and weekdays on Wrestling Observer Live with Brian Alvarez. And I say it every time, but it's only because it's so true. He is the voice of reason for that very fine program. It is Mike Sempervive. Mike, how are things in Delmarva?
I cannot complain whatsoever. It was 65 degrees today.
Ooh, nice.
It was perfect. And it's going to get warmer again, but I'll take it. I'm a man of, I'm not saying ample size, but you know what? I'm ready to not sweat as much, and I'm ready to enjoy this very short fall that we always get before it goes into the throes of winter.
Believe me, we know all about that in Central Texas. It's, but and I think we're about to get a little bit of that cool down too. So it'll be great. All right. As always, I start out. Give me a letter grade for AEW WrestleDream.
Oh boy. You know what? I'm going to say a solid B.
Okay.
I'm going to say a solid B, but I think if you are an AEW fan, once again, you spent your $50. It's an A. Now, sure, creatively, as we'll get to, you may not have liked what they did at the end of that show, but I thought up and down that card, from how it kicked off with Hangman Page and Jay White, all the way to the end with Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley, sure, there was some superfluous stuff on it, but for the most part, it delivered. And again, with the exception of the main event, I don't know how you can't come out of that saying, I'm pretty satisfied with the meal I eat tonight.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I did think going in there were probably at least two matches that could have been on Dynamite. But all in all, it was a solid pay-per-view. Let's go to the main event. Let's talk about Moxley and Danielson. So Jon Moxley pins Bryan Danielson after a brutal match. It actually makes him submit, actually. So Jon Moxley, for the fourth time, is the AEW World Champion. And then we have the beatdown. And then here comes Wheeler Yuta and Darby Allin. And then Wheeler turns on Darby, and Wheeler puts the bag on Bryan Danielson. So the first thing that I kind of the plastic bag over the head. I get it. I get it was a callback. I wasn't comfortable with it the first time they did it. I wasn't comfortable with it this past Saturday, especially because it felt unnecessary, because afterwards they put the chair around Brian's neck and Pillmanized his neck. So it's kind of like, okay, then why the suffocation? Give me your thoughts on that specific part of the post-match beatdown.
Aesthetically, I'm not the biggest fan of the suffocation deal. I've seen it where, of course, obviously Ric Flair and Terry Funk had to have been the first time I've seen it. I have seen since then the bag be used. I've seen like the saran wrap sort of thing be used on people and have their heads wrapped up and do it that way. I get it, but I'm not a horror movie fan. Like there's, I don't know what it is exactly that it just kind of doesn't jive with my wrestling brain is really what it is. And for other people, it does. So I don't blame them for that. If you enjoyed it or you're not bothered by it, they couldn't use blood for whatever reason. I guess they are a commissioned state. I heard Brian and Vinny talking about that. Craig on that show, which is on the F4W online site for members, the Brian and Vinny show. Their friend Craig did bring up, they bleed a lot at indie shows. I've seen that in Maryland as well, too, where if something kind of flies under the radar, you might be able to get away with it. Other places you can kind of get away with it. If you're AEW or WWE, you're not going to be able to get away with it. And that was apparently something that they were not trying to push too heavily on in Washington State. So I guess I get it. But as you mentioned, you did the pilmanizing of his neck. I think there were other things that you probably could have done that could have created a visual of this man finally having nails put in his coffin.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I know that's what the plastic bag was kind of going to, help deliver was, this, we are suffocating and choking out this man's career, his full-time in-ring career, as we shall say here. Yeah. But, we're choking out his career. We're putting it to bed. It's dead. Bryan Danielson's time here is dead. And now we're here. So I understand. I get it, why they did it, but it's a wrestling brain thing. I'm not offended by it. I'm not angered by it. It wasn't to that level of a move, but it's just something about it that doesn't quite fit for me. And I don't think that we're the only two that's the case of.
Yeah, that's kind of me. It just doesn't feel like it fits in a wrestling match. And I get if it's a hardcore match or a death match, okay, maybe. But in a straight up wrestling match, even as brutal as that one, it felt just a little unnecessary. But like you said, I get why.
Yeah, and they do that. The same thing goes for the screwdriver. A lot of people say, what's your issue with the screwdriver? Because unless you're stabbing somebody in the eye with it, it doesn't make any sense. Number one, we have all, me at least, have come to the conclusion, why would a Don Callis, why would that be the weapon of choice in a pro wrestling match where we see guys being hit with chairs and this and that? Well, okay, it's because, it's the screwing of somebody from the Don Callis family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, except he's never said that. There's never been kind of a wink and going, yeah, we're going to screw you or something like that. So you have like Kyle Fletcher who jams it in the back of Will Ospreay's head. And yes, would that hurt all that stuff? Sure, yes. But then why not just have a knife? Why not just have a this or that? Like, how about a short iron pipe that you hit somebody over the head with? I think that would be actually more effective in a wrestling match than the screwdriver. But again, it's one of those things where, am I offended? Am I angered? No, but there's something I'm just, as a fan, here's my feedback. My wrestling brain is not connecting with it.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the screwdriver. Wasn't that what injured Don Callis? That scar he's got on his forehead, wasn't it from a screwdriver?
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe not.
Maybe they spun it that way, but that's when he got knocked into the light rig. Somebody had pushed him out of the way or got shoved, and he hit his head.
You're right.
And then all of a sudden it keeps getting redder and redder as the time goes on. So he certainly has leaned into it.
Oh yeah.
You notice he's even matching the jewelry up to it. Now he's got the ring. And he's got the face on the watch. He's got the ruby look too. I'll give it to him.
Yeah, he is trying to get blinged out. You're right. The other thing is, and we've been hearing it over the last few weeks. Moxley talking about this is bigger than us. I don't want to do this. I have to do this. And we even saw it, and it was, very little was paid attention to it by the commentary team. Where, well, first of all, Bryce Remsburg, who I love to death, he sold the fact that he did not want to give that belt to Moxley. He knew he had to because it was his duty as a referee, but boy, he was hesitant. And I love that part. So he finally hands the belt to Moxley, and Moxley immediately gives it to Pac, and he puts it in this black gym bag. So, and I assume that's playing into this whole, there is a bigger, forgive the pun, a higher power, maybe. Give me your thoughts on that. Where do you think this will go? And what would be a sufficient payoff for it?
I wish I could tell you. I have no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing coming out of this, where there's a lot of AEW fans, a lot of the modern fans. There's a lot of Veruca Salts out there who want it their way, and they want it now at all times. And if you don't do something, that makes them happy at the end, where they feel satisfied. This was terrible. And those people are probably going to come back around again. Their emotions will go away, and the fact that Brian Danielson was not standing there with the white hat at the end, just like Sting, and tipping it and walking away. Hey, they'll come back.
Yeah.
But they're going to come back complaining if you don't do a good job this coming Wednesday to explain why Jon Moxley and his crew are doing this, not only to Bryan Danielson, but now that he's out of the way, what is your mission here? What are you trying to accomplish? We have seen them in the past. Jon Moxley pass Jack Perry, give him a little, pinch on the cheek, and kid, I always liked you, or that sort of thing. I am going to assume that this is going to be bigger than Jon Moxley and his group, and there's going to be some sort of presence that is the reason for all of this. Shane McMahon, obviously, is the name that a lot of people would like to see. I don't think that that's what it's going to be, but could it be a Josh Barnett? Could it be a somebody like that? It's very possible that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as where they're going to go, I don't know. I really don't know, other than I think at the end of the day, when everything shakes out, the person that is going to save the day and put a end to this chapter of the story at the very least is going to be Darby Allin. So at some point, whatever path they take, I think the road is going to lead to a Darby Moxley match for that AEW championship. But how they're going to get there, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it certainly seems like it's going to be a lot bigger than just Wheeler Yuta, Claudio, Moxley, and Marina Shafir doing their thing and Pac doing their thing. It almost feels like it has to be.
Yeah. I agree with you. Now, look, I shudder at the thought of Shane McMahon walking out there, just because I just think there could be so much to fail with that.
It's a great short term to get attention. It's boy, can you ride this out 4 weeks, let alone 6 months.
That's the thing. It would get short time reaction be huge. After that, it's kind of like, really. Now, you mentioned Josh Barnett. That kind of makes sense because of the relationship between Josh Barnett and Moxley and everything. And I kind of like that. I also think there's a possibility it could be somebody that is on the roster that we haven't thought of in, like, it's one of those, just, it'll just be somebody out of the blue. In fact, the name just popped into my head just because I saw him Sunday night at our Inspire After Death Wrestling event in Austin. Ricky Starks, make him the higher power. I mean, that would be. I think that would be a huge surprise that nobody sees coming. But it doesn't even have to be Ricky. It could be just name your favorite AEW roster member that just hasn't been seen in a while. Make them that higher power or whatever. So I get it, and I'm looking forward to see how this plays out. I really am. So we had the triple threat for the international championship. Konosuke Takeshita, Will Ospreay, and Ricochet. In the end, Takeshita wins the title. Kyle Fletcher turning on Will Ospreay. This felt kind of like the more obvious way to go, taking advantage of Takeshita's success in the G1. So I guess, what do you think about Konosuke Takeshita as international champion, and who's his first challenger?
That's a really good question. And it may be Ricochet. I would probably put him in there with Ricochet, depending on what you're going to do. He's going to be friends with Will Ospreay. We know that. Will Ospreay certainly needs a friend right now. If you go in that direction, you could probably have some really fun matches between Takeshita and Ricochet, and you can do the tag team matches with Kyle Fletcher and Takeshita against Ospreay and Ricochet, and I think everybody would really like that. I think it was the right time. Takeshita needed wins. He had that great G1, but when you look at what he's done in AEW, it's not like he's fallen down a bunch of pegs, but what are the signature wins for him? And
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people listening don't care about this, but AEW is going to want you to care about this because they're going to want you to pay for the pay per view. But they're going to Japan on January 5th. Obviously, there's going to be presence on that New Japan Tokyo Dome show on January 4th, but certainly there's going to be the AEW directed and combined pay per view on the 5th. So a strong Takeshita walking in there as the international champion, it's going to be interesting to see what direction they decide to take with him. But the one thing I know is it was the right time, and it's time for him to have a really good reign with that belt. It adds something to Callis. He's got a champion again. Takeshita, we know, can hold up against anybody out there. You can put him in the ring with literally anybody, and he's going to have a good match. And most importantly, in some ways, gets that belt off Ospreay because he doesn't need that belt whatsoever.
Yeah.
He doesn't need any belt whatsoever unless it's the World Heavyweight Championship. So I thought they accomplished a lot in that match.
Mm-hmm.
And it should have been very easy to do with the people that were involved, and it ended up being that way to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch Takeshita as the international champion. Let's see the challengers he gets.
And also too, and I can't remember for sure when the Continental Classic started last year,
Yes.
but it'll be interesting again. Obviously, Eddie Kingston had that deal. He had multiple championships that were always on the line in the Continental Classic. Well, can there be champions involved in the Continental Classic this year that are not going to lose their belts? Is it only the Continental Crown that would be on the line in that tournament? So, there's still a possibility we could see some names kind of start shuffling in there too as we get to, really next month and into December.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. I want to go back for a moment. And this is something I've been asking the last couple of weeks with this whole, Blackpool Combat Club or whatever you want to call them. So you've got that group who's trying to take over AEW and, recreate it in its image. But did we forget about the Elite? Because they were trying to do the same thing. You had Matt and Nick doing their, they attacked Tony Khan, and you got Okada and you got Perry.
What are you talking about? We got Shad.
Yeah,
we got Shad Khan out there.
Right. I mean, but what happens to them? Because, is the BCC, are they going to now take over and Elite just kind of do their thing? What's up with that? I guess that's the best way to ask it.
Can you ask it like Kenan Thompson does? That would be even better if you could ask it like he does on Saturday Night Live in that skit. But
oh yes.
I it's why I said before there's got to be something bigger here at play because, and this also, if you're a fan and have been watching them for 5 years, they have done things that have started off with a big bang and it fizzled out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Tony Khan was in a neck brace. He was, killed on TV. And all of the stuff that kind of happened after that, I guess if you are a real apologist, you can point to the War Games match and this and that and go, they did this and they paid off this and they closed that. No, they didn't.
No.
This is a company of people with multiple vice presidents who are doing their own thing, direct. It's messy. So I'm hoping they have some sort of glue that binds all of that stuff together. But look, that's a real concern. And that's why I said the follow up to this is really what's going to, I think, make people really galvanize them on, okay, was that the right way to go about doing things with Bryan Danielson in his last full-time match? Because you needed to have that done to put this new group over, and you wanted to make Moxley the most hated man on the roster. And doing all that, and you did it. So now, okay, what's next? The Marina Shafir aspect of that group. There is going to have to be a woman that steps up because she choked out Commander. She was beating Zay's rear end after pulling him off the apron and beating him before they have a title match with the Young Bucks. I mean, she's Wheeler Yuta the same way, although, okay, you could say she was in cahoots, but the fact of the matter is, okay, are we going to have a, who's taking her out? Something's going to have to give with that. And again, I just, we'll see what happens. I have no idea. A lot of it's just going to be coming to this Wednesday and going, what is your purpose here? What is
Mm-hmm.
your mission? Because to me, you really do have to have a centerpiece for the heels to kind of like push around. And it's one thing to have one of the groups be on the outside of that, whether it be the House of Black. Okay, they kind of sit on the outside of that. They're like
Mm-hmm.
the Russians with the Four Horsemen and the Rock and Roll and the Road Warriors and everybody, even if they hate
Yeah.
each other, they really hate those Russians. I think it's going to have to be something like that where if it's going to be Christians groups going to be out here, okay, fine. But only one of those groups can be away and everybody else, they may not like each other, but they're going to have to come to the Legion of Doom. That to me is going to be the only way that makes sense. And you could do that
Yeah.
too, because with the amount of bodies that you could have come back, we're seeing Adam Cole back. MJF looks like he's going to be back. He's not filming movies full time. We know we have Daniel Garcia. At some point, Wardlow will be back. At some point, Powerhouse Hobbs will be back. They've had so many. Samoa Joe is a very important piece of any puzzle that you're going to have out there. He's out doing his movie thing and doing his thing. At some point, he'll be back.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time we saw him, he was a world heavyweight champion, losing it to Swerve. So, he's going to come back at the top of the food chain. So, fascinating. You have things that you can do and parts that you can move and things that you can, go ahead and make something happen, but it's going to have to be good. And more than that, it's going to have to be consistent because there's going to be highs and lows and people are going to, how people react to things. They'll see one thing they didn't like on Dynamite and they'll blow up about it. And I hate it and all this stuff. But look, if you keep plugging away and keep pounding the rock every week, at some point, if you stay consistent, you're gonna, they'll come back to it. So we'll see. I have no idea. But to me, they have to be involved with that Moxley group, at least at some level, because again, if they're causing all this hell and havoc on Bryan Danielson, unless Tony Khan is letting that happen, and we're going to go in that direction of he's the the guy behind the BCC, unless you're doing something like that, all the evil has got to be, together.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's got to be logical. It's got to make sense. And I chuckle. I wonder if Tony Khan wanted that spot just so he could wear the neck brace during all the NFL draft coverage, and wear it on Rich Eisen and such, be shown in the war room with the Jaguars.
You know what, Stu, and a lot of people, look, was it corny? Was it goofy? Was it silly? All that stuff? Sure it was. As a wrestling fan, I get a kick out of it because I'm not a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. If I'm a Jags fan, I think a little differently about that sort of stuff. If I'm only an NFL guy, I might think a little differently about that sort of stuff because there are people in the NFL,
mm-hmm.
They don't like wrestling. They don't think this is, they are football.
Yes.
And they don't like the cameras there anyway, let alone to have cameras in there to film you doing your goofy thing. Yeah. So there are going to be people on that side that don't like it either. But the bottom line is for a wrestling fan, once it happened, that was it. Yeah. And yes, okay, the War Games match, but Jack Perry didn't submit. The Young Bucks submitted for him. And what about so why wasn't there any comeuppance to the Young Bucks here from the owner of the company? Mm-hmm. It just went poof and it went away. And, so that's has been one of their problems. That has been one of their bigger problems is you hear a lot about, well, he books in advance and all that stuff. That might be the case. And he's got an idea and he's got the end game on this date and we're going to stick to that. But boy, there's so much stuff in the middle. And it's like talking about the pay-per-views. Every time you say the same thing about the pay-per-views, the TV leading in and coming out of it could be a complete mess. They seem to always nail it on the pay-per-view. It's just, again, all the other steps after that.
It's the build. He forgets there's got to be a logical, trail to lead to that big moment at the pay-per-view. Otherwise, I think you're kind of hurting your pay-per-view audience because now they're thinking, we're not going to see a blow-off or whatever. So you mentioned MJF and Adam Cole. So we had Jack Perry defeating Katsuyori Shibata to keep his TNT title. Daniel Garcia steps up to Jack Perry, so it looks like he wants a shot. Here comes MJF. MJF starts beating up Garcia, and then here comes Adam Cole. And I am happy to see those guys back, particularly Adam Cole. I hope that tomorrow night on Dynamite we do get some sort of an explanation, because remember the last time we saw Adam Cole, he was the devil. He was the leader of the Undisputed Kingdom. So what's happened with that? Or is it?
Why should we hate this guy? I mean, you sure MJF's a prick now, but look what kind of prick you were to him.
Exactly.
You ruined him for the rest of us. Now he's a heel again forever, Adam Cole. If I was a fan looking at it that way, I'd still be pissed at you.
Yeah, exactly. So just give me your thoughts on seeing Adam Cole come back to the ring. MJF, who apparently is starting to become a movie star. But give me your thoughts on their return.
I'm happy he's back. I like Adam Cole. I do. Mm-hmm. And, him as a heel was going to be tough because, unless he's going to be a full-time manager or something like that, people want to see. It's hard not to cheer. I don't know. I like the guy. And he's a better baby face to me than a heel. Mm-hmm. And much like, talking about the situation with Takeshita and Will Ospreay with Fletcher being involved in that mix and Ricochet, same thing here. MJF does not need to have any belt on him or being involved in any belt that's not the World Heavyweight Championship. All of that other stuff should be beneath him at this point. So, but you still got the issue with Daniel Garcia, and Daniel Garcia and Jack Perry only make sense for Daniel Garcia in a lot of ways for me, from how it looks to the actual matches and how they would work with each other and all that sort of stuff. Perry and Garcia, I think, is great. So I think you have the same scenario where you can have Jack Perry defend the title against Adam Cole, beat Adam Cole. Boy, that's a big feather in the cap of Jack Perry, mm-hmm. defeating Adam Cole, and he defends the TNT championship, but he does it because MJF interfered. And then Daniel Garcia comes out and makes the save, and, at some point at the pay-per-view, whatever the next one is, which I guess would be, World's End. Mm-hmm. Is it World's End?
Full Gear November, World's End December.
That's right. See, Full Gear is the one I keep forgetting about. So let's say it's at Full Gear. You can build up and have that match, for the TNT title, but then also have a tag match on Collision or Dynamite between the four of them. So I like it in that it keeps MJF when he should be in the world title mix at all times, but you can't do that right now. So how do you put him in something that's underneath and still make it work? Well, it's great because he's got this deal going on with Cole. Mm-hmm. Cole's got a deal going on. So I like the way you can mix and match those parts there.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And you know what? And you don't need then MJF to be on TV every week as well, too.
Yeah, you're right.
That may be part of this, too, here, because he films, whatever. Again, all the things that this guy is going to be able to do outside of the wrestling sphere.
Yes, absolutely. Private Party Young Bucks, for the tag titles. See, the wrestling canon suggests that if you get the special video during an entrance, usually that means whoever is involved in that video is probably going to go over. That didn't happen. Private Party losing to the Young Bucks. They kept flashing to Top Flight that was sitting in the crowd and Stokely Hathaway, who looked like, somebody just pissed in his Cheerios. It was just, he always looked nasty.
It was Chris Statlander. That's apparently the excuse as to why they broke up, because unless you saw Rampage, you have no idea why they're not together anymore, which again, there's very few people in the wrestling business I have enjoyed than Stokely Hathaway. Yeah. Way back when he was Ramon in ROH and doing things on the indies. He's a very creative, very sharp and quick guy, and I really like him a lot, but boy, he's been the ROH commissioner. He's had this faction, he's had that faction, he's had the other faction. It's like, again, a great example as to, too many things for too much time. But Private Party, they made fun of the fact that they beat the Young Bucks 5 years ago, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why they get the title shot. There was actually and I think this was on Dynamite last week. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Where Action Andretti and Layla Gray are there with Top Flight, and they're talking about the fact we should have had that title shot. We beat them. We've already beat them. I had to go back and look. It was January of 2023. It's like this is silly. I don't know why you're doing this, but this is silly. But Private Party's fun. They had a good match, but they're not over right now. They're not just they weren't in a position to be in a tag team championship match. And now it seems like it's gonna lead into Type Flight getting one. And I like those guys too, but it's like the same sort of thing where why?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why is this happening? Why is it not? And maybe they're doing this to build up to Truth Magnum and Turbo Floyd and the Outrunners getting the tag title shot. I mean, that's what I would assume is going to happen at some point here. But can we get this tag team division on track?
Yeah.
Why are they
They,
arguing in the back all the time with each other? Top Flight. Why are Roosh and Mortos, or at least Mortos and Dralistico, why are they not a team? Where is FTR? Why are they only doing 80s videos? There are so many things when it comes to the tag and the trios division where it's like, what is going on here? You just want to grab somebody, shake them, and go, damn it, there's too much talent here. And you know me, I'm a tag team wrestling guy. Go ahead and put this over here. Slaughter
absolutely.
and Kernoodle. That's against Steamboat and Youngblood. I'll be on that forever. So it,
Agreed.
it really drives me nuts. And AEW is a place where tag teams can main event because a
Yes.
program, if done right, doesn't matter how big they are, how small they are, whatever it is, you can have a main event program and they have the talent to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't take advantage of it for whatever reason. Everything ends up being messy. So I don't know where they're going with these tag belts, but I'm going to assume at some point it would be the Outrunners because I don't know who else it would be at this point.
I can't even think of too many. I mean, AEW seemingly inherited one of the best tag divisions from Ring of Honor, and now, I, you'd be hard pressed to name half a dozen tag teams, maybe.
Well, it's like, the excuse of Taven and Bennett were, well, they're ROH. Okay, then they lost the tag titles there. So now there's no excuse for them to be there. I
Mm-hmm.
know they're goofballs. They're really good working goofballs. And if you do something with it where they and Roderick Strong, again, they're easy to hate and to boo, and they can work really well. Do something more serious with them. There's too many, and there's so many talented people just floating on their own. And
Yeah.
I understand that some people don't want to be part of tag teams, and I get that. But some people, sometimes you got to tell them you're under contract. We're going to put this thing together.
Yeah.
Where the hell's Buddy? We got a Brody King Darby Allin match in Seattle. Made sense to do that. I get it. Fine. Where's Malachi and Buddy? Are they even around anymore? Where's this person and that person? It's just, you have more than enough bodies, more than enough teams, and not enough creative to do something with all of those teams. I mean, it's not great, stupid. Think back to like Survivor Series era 88.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, you had the Hart Foundation and the Bulldogs, but then you also had the Young Stallions and the Bolsheviks. You
Yeah.
had, all those, you at least had people that matched up, where now you don't have that. Again, even if you didn't want to do it, you have pieces that you could put together on the puzzle, and
Mm-hmm.
you should have that now. You got a bunch of puzzle pieces, but they're all, they're the wrong fit.
It's yeah. I don't get it, and it's. I mean, it is, and it's one part of the whole story of AEW. Too many folks on the roster. They're not using a bunch of them, and it's one of those things, kind of out of sight, out of mind. When someone comes back, it's like, oh my god, I forgot that person works for AEW now. So
And what you
it's
don't want to fall into too is what was happening with WWE for years, with like they'd screw up a push of Alberto or Barrett or whoever, and it's like, okay, they get hurt, and it's better that they're hurt because they're not on TV getting hurt by whatever you're booking them with, and then they come back. It's like, hey, And we've had that. I mean, look at
Mm.
Wardlow. We've had that multiple times with a couple different people where it's like, okay, out of sight, out of mind. Now they're back, and it's like, and nope,
Oh yeah,
it didn't quite go, and now they've disappeared again.
yeah. Anything else from Wrestle Dream stick out in your mind? You had the Mortos and hologram match, which led to Roosh and Dralistico coming down, and you had Mariah May, successfully defending her title. We didn't see Okada except in a backstage segment. We didn't see Mercedes Moné except during a backstage segment, which kind of puzzled me. Those are your two of your high dollar folks, and they're not wrestling on a pay per view. All right. But anything else stick out from Wrestle Dream that you can think of?
Mortos for sure. I like hologram. We'll see what happens now with the Fox Sports Mexico show. There seems like there's going to be a focus on some of these guys. We'll see. We've heard that before, and things have kind of not.
Mm-hmm.
Guys have looked good, guys have stood out, but then, pardon me, it's not as bad as WWE. But have you been able to differentiate all those mass wrestlers for those people who are not the hardest of hardcore wrestling fans? Do they know what's going on? You've had groups now, go back and forth. LFI's gone. Now it's back again. Jake Roberts is there. I don't know why Jake Roberts is there. I asked Brian on the air. It was like, are they going back to Mexico? Like, because Jake, no, there's too much heat there. Why the hell is Jake Roberts with Roosh Mortis and Dralistico? It doesn't make
Yeah,
any sense to me. They don't need a mouthpiece. They just need Roosh to go out there and do his thing in broken English because he's effective, because it comes across because of how intense he is. Sure, you don't understand everything he's saying. Still better than Andrade. Sometimes listen to some of his promos the way they would go, and Mortis can just sit there and blow smoke out of his nose. Like, okay,
it's true.
cool. Like, but again, long story short on that one, I like Hologram. I think they're going to have to figure out some ways to make him, a little bit more appealing, to cross over to people, especially because he can't speak English, or at least doesn't speak good enough English to do promos, But that match was really superfluous, but I enjoyed it, and it shows that Hologram can be a little something on your card, up and down the card somewhere there. He's going to be able to have a fit, and Mortos, I think, is somebody that if you utilize him correctly, Don Callis, again, I thought Don Callis was going to do it. Now we'll find out with Jake Roberts, but you can utilize him correctly. He can be a fun character on your card for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely for sure. And that's pretty much about it because, the Willow Mariah thing kind of went the way I thought it was going to go. Hangman Page and Jay White, I thought was a great way to open the show. I think they match up great with each other. I'm a fan of both of those guys. So we'll see now with Jay White, Juice Robinson being back. There's another one. Boy, they would be my AEW tag team champions.
Exactly.
Jay White limit his promos. I thought he'd be able to get over in this country off his promo ability. They've actually given him too much time, and he's got way too much to say. Focus your promos, cut them short because you can be effective. And after you cut it, then Juice Robinson's going to jump up behind you like a crazed Yosemite Sam anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
perfect. And I don't want to see Paige and Jay White go forever. I kind of want to see where Paige is going to fit in this whole BCC world and this new world of AEW. Is he the man on his own because he doesn't like any of these guys? Or we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But Okada not being there, or Okada and Paige still going to have issues down the line? Is that something they could be doing? What are you doing with Okada? But I think at some point, I'd love to see that Continental title go away because I'd just love to see some of these titles go away. But with Okada, somebody else should probably have the belt because I don't know if Okada is going to work in AEW. I think the people that
Mm-hmm.
like him, who have seen him for years, like me, I know what he was. He's not that now, and he can go. He can go a lot better, and we've seen it when we faced Danielson,
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I don't know if enough people if it's going to work. I really don't. He's so I don't know what you can do with him, but I am real shaky on him going forward because he didn't do anything. People love cheering him, and it's like maybe you got to maybe figure out a way where he's. I don't want to say Randy Orton's a bad example, like guy who does nothing, but like a guy who can do very little in the ring, get the most out of it, and get the most crowd reaction out of it. And I don't know how he's going to end up fitting in the mix, but it has not been good. I think I don't want to say
No,
it's been money wasted, but I don't know. I
it.
can't see how you get the money back out.
I agree. It, I mean, and this sounds so simple, and I'm not sure it is, but would it be a bad idea to have Okada turn babyface, turn on the Elite? Because, like you said, the crowd loves to cheer him. They hit his music, they go nuts. And is that part of the problem? The fact that he's trying to be a heel, and it it just ain't working. It's kind of like when they tried to turn the Road Warriors heel on Dusty all those years ago, and it didn't take.
Yeah, and but what is his role? Yes, he's there, and he's got a lot of money now, and he hangs out with the Young Bucks. Other than that, like
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. And again, he's important because especially going into the end of the year, because you do have that thing in January and you do have the Continental Classic, I assume, coming up here at the end of the year. Again, I'm assuming that that's going to be a tournament that they're going to be running again. But like, yeah, I don't know. And that's a lot. I've heard a couple people say, boy, Minoru Suzuki now wasn't what he was. He wasn't what he was when he came here,
mm-hmm.
and you were able to get away with the gimmick because people hadn't seen it. But now he's gone everywhere. We've seen him against everybody. He's done the same Minoru Suzuki thing. Tomohiro Ishii works better in Japan because people know how long he had been around for and all that stuff. And I think they took a lot of that for granted when it came to those guys that just our fan base is so smart and they are so respectful that these guys, if we put them on TV, people are going to love it. It has proven now not to be the case. You know,
Yeah,
it just unfortunately has, and Okada fits into that hole, unfortunately, as well, too. A lot of the guys, you know, Naito has been shot. Tanahashi has been shot for a long time. Unless you have that emotional attachment or are so big of a wrestling fan that you
mm-hmm.
hold these guys in some reverence, man, you got to figure out a way to get that talent over better if you want to make sure, again, Kesh has been a good special case here with Callis, but even him, what have you really done with him on a major scale? You know, outside of a couple of banger matches, what great feud has he been attached to? What
True.
great things? So it's you're going to have to figure out a way to get both your, you know, your all of your talent. Frankly, the English speakers too, but certainly you know your Latin talent and your Japanese talent. You're going to have to find a better use for them because otherwise,
Yeah,
what are you paying them for?
you're right. You're right. Couple things. First of all, you just mentioned him. Hiroshi Tanahashi announced he is going to retire. His final match will be at Wrestle Kingdom in January of 2026. Tanahashi, multiple time IWGP heavyweight champion. He's the ace. You're one of the best experts on Japanese pro wrestling that I know. T- Tell people the important, how important Tanahashi has been to New Japan Pro Wrestling.
He is, in my opinion, one of the best pro wrestlers of all time, of this era, certainly. One of the best
Mm-hmm.
baby faces of all time, any era, period, point blank. A ball of charisma, and wow, was he important. Three Musketeers of Katsuyori Shibata, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Hiroshi Tanahashi. New Japan in 2000, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5 was a mess. They
Mm-hmm.
were coming out, they were transitioning, they were not doing a very good job dealing with the fact that Pride and K1 and real shoot fighting, you know, got involved and became the pro wrestling again. Because people in Japan for years, Inoki, why is he held in such reverence? Pro wrestling. And look, these guys are grappling and fighting or whatever, but there's wrestling involved. Everything is pro wrestling, with how they promoted their fight events. And unfortunately, the Inokiism that was going on then, they put guys like Yuji Nagata in shoot fights, and they put guys who, again, were good at wrestling or good at this or good at that, put them in shoot fights, and it helped destroy the company because these guys would get knocked out by Mirko Cro Cop in 54 seconds or whoever it was, and it did a lot of damage. But there was still a real push that, man, Shinsuke Nakamura is going to be that guy, and they put him in there with Fedor Emelianenko. He loses, and I think that may have been 54 seconds. Katsuyori Shibata, he was going to be the shooter. Well, Hiroshi Tanahashi wasn't any of those things, and I think he may have actually been in a jungle fight or some sort of shoot fight scenario at some point. I think everybody was there, but he was a pro wrestler. And it took Nakamura, like these were the three musketeers, and Shibata leaves, and Nakamura gets knocked out, and he's got to go reinvent himself, and he's got to build himself back up again. And this whole time, Tanahashi slowly starts to make it up. And there was an issue earlier on in his career where he was actually stabbed by an ex-girlfriend, took himself to the hospital, but there were people in the company that, man, look at this bad publicity. He got beat up by a woman, got stabbed by a woman. This is the mentality there of like, he'll never be a star here. Mm-hmm. Kept plugging away. He was unsinkable. And you see him go ace. He was so important to make New Japan fans, so many of whom have been run off, who had felt bad about cheering pro wrestling while everybody else had moved on to shoot fighting. And you watch that fake crap and all that sort of stuff that you would, you would hear way back in the day. That's what was happening to him and to those fans. And he was the one that slowly, step by step, by just being consistent and being in awesome matches and just by being a force, he became the biggest star in that company. And him and his matches with Shinsuke Nakamura were so important to rebuild the identity of New Japan Pro Wrestling. I'll have a lot to say about it come January 2026. That is for sure. But if you know about New Japan Wrestling right now and are not from a certain age and you're a little bit younger, you know about it because of Hiroshi Tanahashi. Yeah. Sure, when the Young Bucks went and Chris Jericho went over there, Jeff Jarrett, they had the big Wrestle Kingdom 9 pay-per-view or whatever it was, the one that was real big and aired here in America, and that's what really kind of busted them through. Well, that whole thing had been building up for 7 years to get to that point off the back of Hiroshi Tanahashi and other people as well, too. Certainly Shinsuke Nakamura, you needed to have that, you need to have a good opponent, for your top star, and they were perfect for each other, but it's really hard to describe in a short period of time of what a mess New Japan was. And they gave him shots, and then they try to pull it out because Kaz Fujita's here, or because this guy from the past is coming back, and it's like, he was the one constant. And boy, unfortunately for people that only saw him in AEW at the end of his run, and so he can't move because of the knees and all that sort of stuff, but he really is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. He truly, truly is.
Yeah, I had Cowboy Johnny Mantel, who legendary Texas wrestler. He and I were at the press conference when they decided to kick off the G1 in Dallas, and Tanahashi was there. And then afterwards, Johnny went outside, and I followed him. And Johnny told Hiroshi Tanahashi that Tanahashi reminded him of a young Kerry Von Erich. I mean, and that was, that meant that, and you could see it in Tanahashi's eyes. He knew what that meant. He knew how big that was, especially, in the state of Texas. And he was very grateful for that. The other thing, the news broke earlier this afternoon, longtime Ring of Honor Chief Operating Officer Joe Koff passed away, battling from cancer. He was instrumental in the success of Ring of Honor under the Sinclair umbrella. Just give me your thoughts on the passing of Joe Koff.
I'm sad. I didn't realize he was that sick. Brian asked me today on the show had I ever met Joe, and I think I actually had. I didn't have any long conversations, but I'm pretty sure, now that I think about it, when they were based out of Baltimore and running a lot of shows at UMBC, in Catonsville and running their shows there. I believe I did have a chance to meet him, but it doesn't matter if I did or not. The point is, everybody that did meet him and did work for him, nobody's saying a bad word about him. I have never heard a bad word spoken about Joe Koff. The closest you can come to that is when Jim Cornette talks about a lot of the frustrations that he was having and, with HDNet and everything that was going on, and then ultimately helping to sell the company. That, yeah, there were times where they would, butt heads and things like that from a business point of view, but he's always speaking with great reverence of Joe Koff. And you've seen it now with Cody Rhodes and a lot of the people that did work there, how much he meant to them, that he was just a good guy. And he was a big wrestling fan. And for me, it goes back to those Battle of the Belts, because I didn't get championship wrestling from Florida where I was. But, they did the syndication of those Battle of the Belt shows with Flair and Wahoo and Flair and Wyndham. And it's like, that was cool. Like, if you weren't in an area, if you got a station to pick that up, a syndicated station, that was great, because you only get, if you're in a, you didn't see people doing that. You saw, okay, that the hour-long show of maybe World Class or even Florida or wherever you were at, you saw some other wrestling, but to have a special on a Saturday night, a special show that wasn't WWF or NWA on pay-per-view is going to be in syndication, and that's, okay, look, folks, we used to watch the Blue Bonnet Bowl in syndication, all right? The syndication was a big deal, and these distributors, were it was a big deal. And I always had a lot of respect for him for that, and the fact that he stayed with it and he tried. And when they got ROH over on Sinclair, he was going to try to kick off syndication, and which unfortunately never worked, because down here in Briscoe territory, here in Sussex County, we didn't have an affiliate. We had no Sinclair affiliate, and that can be good and bad depending on how you want to look at things. But I couldn't see Ring of Honor, and that stung. So, unfortunately, they never got that kicked off. I think they only did it in Atlanta, the old 37, I think it was, whatever the old historical syndicated wrestling station there was. But we wouldn't even be talking about Ring of Honor right now if that deal doesn't get brokered.
Yeah.
And he, led that company. And you can say what you want about the Sinclair era, but you know what? They never fired anybody. And the bottom line is, if they didn't buy it, what the hell was going to happen? It would have been dead. It would have just been sitting there, dormant, until somebody came and picked up the scraps for it. But he was the one that was able to negotiate that deal. And I don't know this. I'd love to talk to Tony Khan about it. Maybe I can down the line, or maybe he'll come out and talk about how it worked buying it from Sinclair. Did Joe Koff have any help in doing that? Because Sinclair could have just taken all that and said, yeah, we own it all now. We're just going to shove it in the bin over here. And we'll pull it out if we need it later on. But they didn't have to sell it, but they did. And I'd like to know if he was involved in that too, if he had any involvement in it, because again, we wouldn't be talking about it right now if it wasn't for him helping to broker that deal. And again, everything everybody has said about him has been so nice in glowing terms. So that says a lot about somebody, TV and wrestling business, where nobody can say anything bad about him. But Joe Koff certainly seems to be one of those guys. Gary Juster I would talk with a lot, and I always liked Gary Juster a lot, and he was a hero to me because he did bring the AWA in Georgia and stuff like that into Maryland and into DC. So he was an important part, and he always said nice things about Joe Koff. And so it's just, it's a sad, everybody's got to go at some point. We all do. Yeah. But boy, I didn't realize he was that ill. So to get that news this morning was like, oh, because you don't want to see anybody pass, but especially not somebody that nobody's got anything bad to say. It's always hurts a little bit more when it's like when one of the good ones goes.
You're right. And I was lucky enough to meet Joe Koff a few times, interviewed him once or twice. And you're right. Such a wonderful man. He loved wrestling. You talk about, if Sinclair did not buy Ring of Honor, and I've talked to Kerry Silkin, a dear friend, and we've talked about it, and he will admit, if that deal doesn't get brokered, he was having a lot of trouble trying to keep the lights on in Ring of Honor. So, and he and Joe were really tight. And, I think of Kerry today, when this news came out, and I still remember to this day sitting in the press area at Madison Square Garden during the G1 Supercard, and Joe Koff is walking. He's shaking our hands, and you could not pry the smile off of his face to see his company in the world's most famous arena. He was so proud of that moment, and I was happy for him. And to hear that he passed away, yeah, it's a sad day.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm
Yeah,
glad you brought up G1 Supercar because that's one of the best shows I've ever been to as far as having fun in the in that building.
yeah,
That was one of the times where I could have gotten press, but a buddy, my good friend Dennis Gorman, who writes for Newsday up there,
mm-hmm,
and he was like, you guys want to go? Talking to Adam, we're getting tickets. We're not going to get press. We're going to get tickets because we
yeah,
want to be. And we ended up doing that, like $200 for these tickets. I mean, I think that's the most I've ever paid for a wrestling ticket. Was whatever I had paid for that show.
yeah.
But my God, that show was great.
It
And it was
was,
just, it was a lot of it was just the fact that, remember WWE tried to
yeah,
help, stuck the foot in, and went, no, you can do that to a lot of people. We're Sinclair Broadcasting. You're
yeah,
not doing that crap to us. And I'm glad to hear, that you couldn't wipe the smile off his face because you couldn't wipe the smile off a lot of people's faces that night
mm-hmm,
because it was a gigantic win. It was kind of just like a big exhale of, we did make this. And,
yeah,
did New Japan draw that house? Yes, they did. Now, some people can, again, there was all that stuff that happened with the Young Bucks and a lot of people in the split that was happening at
mm-hmm,
the time. There was all of that too. And you could say that they kind of, people thinking they were going to be there. But I can tell you what, by the time that Jay White got done winning that title, do you remember anybody saying, boy, I wish Cody was here. I wish the Bucks was here. Not to say that they would not have added
no,
anything, but the fact was they didn't have to be there because this was a big win for ROH and for New
it
Japan. And
was,
I'm so happy that I'm glad you brought that up because
yeah.
him having a part in that was very important.
And I remember to this day, bunch of us after that show, we went to this bar, and I walk in. First person I see is Gary Jester, and he is celebrating. And I went over there, hugged his neck. I said, "Man, y'all did it," and I was so happy for him. He was thrilled, and I know Joe was thrilled. So, what a great legacy for him. And yeah, you see all the tributes that have poured in for Joe Koff, such a wonderful man and a very important piece of wrestling history, very, very vital to Ring of Honor Wrestling. So he is Mike Sempervive. Catch him on the wrestling news on the Big Audio Nightmare Mid-Atlantic Championship podcast and weekdays on Wrestling Observer Live with Brian Alvarez. Mike, I appreciate it, man. I always love chopping it up with you. All the best to you, and we will talk again soon.
Yes, sir.